Welcome to Sodanonymous. I'm your host, Sodanonymous. Today's episode is going to be Pepsi Wild Cherry. First off, we got the fun facts, so let's go over that real quick. Pepsi Wild Cherry, originally known as Wild Cherry Pepsi, came about as a replacement for another cherry cola that PepsiCo introduced in 1984, known as Cherry Cola Slice. Slice was a popular line of fruit-flavored soft drinks that was created in 1984 and lasted all the way into the late 2000s. Some of the flavors offered were strawberry, apple, grape, mango, among many others. Cherry Cola Slice was replaced by Wild Cherry Pepsi in 1988, likely in response to the success of Cherry Coke in 1986. Wild Cherry Pepsi was reformulated slightly in 2005 and had its name changed to Pepsi Wild Cherry, and that's what we have here today. Pepsi Wild Cherry is currently available in the diet and zero sugar varieties, formerly known as Pepsi Max, as well as an officially licensed lip balm, which I think is kind of interesting. All right, well, with these fun facts out of the way, let's get on with the review. All right, well, first things first is my experience with the drink. I don't think I've ever had Pepsi Wild Cherry before, so I think this is going to be a blind tasting. If I've had it, it's been sort of in passing, either at like a kid's birthday party when I was younger, or mixed with alcohol at college or something to that effect. I don't think I've ever purchased a Wild Cherry Pepsi myself, and I don't think I've ever tried it. And if I have tried it, it hasn't stuck with me. So for all intents and purposes, this is going to be a blind tasting. So that's kind of exciting. Yeah, I've got a couple things to say. First off, the design is consistent with the rest of Pepsi's line that I've seen so far. In other words, it's based off of the standard minimalist can design that they're doing on their regular Pepsi. The only difference is it's got a red band at the top, just like the white band that you see on the vanilla Pepsi. And it's also got little cherries in the corner here, just like what the vanilla has the vanilla flower look. So yeah, it looks okay. It looks kind of cool. I would say that I am very curious if this is going to be like Pepsi Vanilla, in the sense that the Coca-Cola variant, the Vanilla Coke, is a predominantly vanilla beverage, and it's Coke second. So with Vanilla Coke, the strongest flavor is the vanilla, and then there's a little bit of Coke hint underneath. And it's the same thing with Cherry Coke. With Cherry Coke, the main flavor is the cherry, and then there's the Coca-Cola base underneath. With the Vanilla Pepsi, or Pepsi Vanilla rather, it's more of a 50-50 mix, where half of it is the Pepsi flavor, the cola flavor, and the other half is vanilla. So I'm very curious if this is going to be consistent with that, if Wild Cherry isn't going to be a predominantly cherry soda, if it's going to be more of a 50-50 mix of the Pepsi flavor and the cherry flavor. So that'll be interesting. I'm also curious if the cherry is going to be the same type of cherry taste as a Cherry Coke, because Cherry Coke is definitely a very deep cherry that I think works very well with the deep flavor of Coke. I think they work synergistically together. Pepsi is more of a bright drink, and there's definitely different kinds of cherry taste. I wonder if this is going to go more towards the bright candy cherry kind of taste that you would get out of, say, a cherry candy or even Cheerwine. So that'll be interesting. One more thing I do have to mention is in the ingredients, it's sweetened with high fructose corn syrup predominantly, but there's also a little bit of cane sugar in the Wild Cherry formula, which I think is interesting because there is a little bit of sugar in the regular Pepsi formulation as well, and I think they put it in there just for a little bit of a pop. You know, that's what they do for regular Pepsi, but they didn't do that for Pepsi Vanilla. So I would have expected the same thing for Wild Cherry Pepsi, but I guess that's not the case. So this is sweetened with high fructose corn syrup predominantly, and it's got a little bit of cane sugar in there. All right, well, that's all I have to say leading into it. So without further ado, let's get started. All right, let's pop this guy open. Good sound. Gonna do first a sniff test here. There we go. Standard cola color, as expected, as these all tend to look. Yeah, it looks like Pepsi. It's, I'd say, standard level of carbonation. Doesn't seem very extremely carbonated, doesn't seem undercarbonated. Just about what you would expect. Let's take a sniff here. Okay. All right, well, the cherry itself is prominent. I'd say it's probably the most prominent part of the drink. The type of cherry, where I was curious if it was going to be a similar type of cherry to the way Coke cherry does their flavor, which is more of a deeper, darker taste, or if it was going to be more of a candied cherry. It is fairly similar to Cherry Coke in terms of the smell. I get almost a little hint of citrus in there, a little bit more than you would get from Cherry Coke. It's definitely smells a bit more acidic, so it's almost like cherry and lime smell a little bit. But it doesn't smell bad. It smells appetizing. I'd say it's a little bit brighter smelling, but I don't think the cherry flavor itself is the aspect that smells brighter. I think it's probably the Pepsi aspect of it, because Pepsi is a brighter smelling soda than Coke is. Coke tends to be more deep, and this is definitely on their side of the camp. I could definitely pick Pepsi out of that. So I wouldn't say it's a 50-50 mix like Pepsi Vanilla in terms of the smell. It's more like 70-30, where 70% is the cherry aspect of the drink, and then the 30% is the cola aspect of the drink. Yeah, it smells fairly appetizing. I like that cherry smell. Like I said, it's similar to a Cherry Coke. Just a bit different of a ratio and a little bit brighter. Okay, so let's give this a shot. As I said before, I don't believe I've had this before. So for all intents and purposes, it's going to be blind tasting. So I'm excited about that. Without further ado, let's get into it. Huh. I don't know. It definitely 100% tastes different than Cherry Coke. So they're not going to be very similar. I expected from the smell that it was going to taste more similar to Cherry Coke than, say, Coke versus Pepsi regular. But this is pretty unique in what I've tasted. This is kind of its own thing, which is fine. It's great. It's really sweet. I'm talking even sweeter than regular Pepsi. This thing is super bright. The cherry taste is super bright. It's candy. It's a candy sugar sweet. A little bit of bite, not much. I'd say it's about the same as a regular Pepsi in terms of bite. The predominant flavor is definitely sweetness. So rather than with Cherry Coke, for example, when you first drink it, the first big blast of flavor is a cherry taste. This is definitely, first you get like sugar. It's just such a bright candy taste. And then immediately following that initial brightness of sugar comes the cherry flavor. Which I'd say tastes a little bit more, I want to say like physically biting into a cherry, it tastes a little bit more like this. Sweetness aside, because it's definitely way sweeter than an actual cherry. The flavor itself, the more subdued, not so deep and dark flavor of the cherry in Pepsi Wild Cherry tastes to me more like eating a real cherry. You get a little bit of the Pepsi aftertaste. Definitely the lime aspect or the acidic aspect comes from the Pepsi flavor. In terms of cola, you get little notes of the spices in there, but because Pepsi's not a dark drink, it's not really moving it into to a different sort of place in terms of taste. They sort of work together where Cherry Coke works synergistically with its deeper, darker cherry taste. Pepsi Wild Cherry works synergistically with the brighter cherry taste than its brighter cola counterpart. So this is all right. It's definitely, I think this is the sweetest drink I've tried so far on Sodanonymous. More than anything Coke's put out, even more than vanilla. This is extremely, extremely just pop sugar. It's really a candied drink. So I think that's going to scare a lot of people off. Kids would probably like this just because it's just so bright. If you're not a candy soda kind of guy, this will probably scare you off, and I'd probably steer you away from this because yeah, you're coming here for the real sugary sweet stuff. All right, well, just to help better articulate the flavor and the difference between them, I'm going to compare it to a regular Pepsi here, and we're going to see if we can sort of pick out how the cherry influences the taste and compare and contrast here. So I got some water here just to clean up my mouth here. And let's get into that comparison. Regular Pepsi. All right. Yeah, it's Pepsi. Not a huge fan, but it's all right. It's got a distinct sort of simplistic artificial flavor. And then Pepsi Wild Cherry. Yeah, it's just such a bright, powerful drink. It's definitely bold, which is interesting. So it's like you're not getting a hint of cherry. You're definitely getting like smacked in the face with cherry. It's just the cola itself isn't differentiating itself enough from the cherry. So it doesn't quite taste just like a cherry soda necessarily, but it's just a super bright candied cherry cola. Definitely more cherry than cola in this mixture. It's definitely still more simplistic and simple than a cherry Coke, where a cherry Coke has these interesting notes of Coke through it, and the deeper, sort of darker cherry flavor is more enjoyable for me. This is mostly all sweetness all the time, with a little subtle hints of flavor underneath. As I said before, I think kids are really going to like this. If you like really bright, sugary drinks, if you go for the more candied style beverages, this might be more for you. I think the guy who tends to pick Pepsi over Coke may find themselves enjoying this more. I would say, however, if you are a predominantly Pepsi drinker, and when you do choose to drink cherry, you pick wild cherry Pepsi, If you've not really had cherry Coke before, I would say give that a shot. Just as an aside, I know a lot of people who prefer Pepsi will say that Coke is too acidic or it tastes too not sweet enough. And I think that cherry Coke is sweeter than regular Coke, and it's not as acidic as regular Coke. It doesn't necessarily have that same bite. So yeah, if you're the opposite of me and you've been having wild cherry your whole life, but you've never really had cherry Coke, I would say reach outside of your comfort zone a little bit, buy one, give it a shot. I think you might be interested in it. As for me coming across from the other side of the aisle, I'm probably not going to have this again. This is too bright for me. I don't really like it. It's not enough of a cherry cola flavor for me to get on board. It's just kind of a really sugary, sweet sugar water with a splash of cherry extract in there and hints of a hint of cola sort of surrounding the sugar. So this is too sweet for me, to really truly be enjoyable. I'm going to go ahead and give that a, let me think. Yeah, I was right. That's going to be a 4 out of 10. Definitely in the bad side of the camp. I don't think it's horrible. I don't think it's horrendous. I think this has an audience for certain people. I think it's going to be the people who just really, they eat a lot of candy. They'll eat really full snow cones, with all the syrup. If you are looking for just the sugariest sugar cherry cola beverage you can possibly imagine, Pepsi Wild Cherry is your guy. I tend not to be a prude about this kind of stuff. I really like the taste of sugar. I like sweet things. I've enjoyed Pepsi with real sugar as an example, where it is very sweet, but it also has a whole bunch of distinct flavors underneath. It's just I don't like sugar water that's just sugar water. And this is fairly close to sugar water that's just sugar water. Yeah, I don't think it's a very impressive flavor. I won't accuse it of being artificial, because the cherry flavor is actually, I think, pretty much on the mark in terms of a good cherry taste. It doesn't taste like cough syrup like a lot of cherry stuff tends to taste like. It's an enjoyable cherry flavor. It's just the cola is not good enough to carry the cherry, and it's way, way, way too sweet. Sweeter than Mountain Dew, sweeter than pretty much anything that I could think of, that you can make into a drink. This is just sickly sweet. So anyway, I don't really have much more to say. There's not so much of a bite. The carbonation is good. It's fairly average. I wouldn't say it's exceptional like Coke, but it's not super duper weak or anything. It is just an extremely bright cherry soda. And that's all I have to say about it. It's a 4 out of 10. Okay, well, have you ever had Pepsi Wild Cherry before? Let me know down in the comments below. Are you a big Coca-Cola cherry kind of guy or a wild cherry Pepsi kind of guy? If you have a huge preference for one or the other, let me know why and sort of explain yourself. And if you've never had, if you've only had Pepsi Wild Cherry as an example, and you've never had Cherry Coke, reach outside your comfort zone a little bit, because it is definitely not the same thing. Just like how Pepsi and Coke are radically different, Pepsi Wild Cherry and Cherry Coke are radically different as well. So if you're big on one side and you've never really tried the other, like me, for example, go ahead and explore out of your comfort zone. I definitely was surprised at how different this tasted, and yeah, it was a little adventure. I don't enjoy it, so I'm not going to drink it again. But that was nifty. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe, do whatever you got to do, spread me around, do what you want. And yeah, this is Sodanonymous signing off, and hope to see you next time. Thanks.